Let's call the meeting to order and have roll call. Oh, I'm sorry. Before I even do that, I've got to read the statement as usual about Zoom. In accordance with the Governor's disaster declaration and suspension of certain aspects of the Open Meetings Act, this meeting is being held virtually via Zoom. The public was invited to provide input via email before the meeting. The Zoom information was published with the agenda so members of the public may attend the meeting virtually and provide input. Okay, now we can do a roll call.
Sorry, I have a little boy with me today. All right. Ms. Salmon.
Here.
Ms. Bex. Ms. Hedlund.
Present.
Mr. Miller.
I'm here.
Mr. Modica.
Here.
Ms. Orchardson is excused. Mr. Pania. And Mr. Robinson should be joining us shortly.
Okay. Next, let's move to approval of the minutes of previous meetings. Does anybody have any comments or questions about the January meeting?
I don't.
Okay. All right. I move we should approve those minutes as read. Can I have a second on that?
Second.
Okay. We do need to do a roll call vote on that.
I'm
Since
not
this is
sure
Zoom.
we have
You only
quorum
have
to be able to do
present.
that. So
okay.
we might have to wait until Stacy gets here and come back to this agenda item.
Okay, that's fine. Okay, any additions to the agenda you want to mention? Or
Just one thing I wanted to mention, and that is that I have full intention for us to have a robust dialogue tonight, and I expect that we may value continuing the conversation. So I will put it on for next month. That will likely be kind of continuing our dialogue for strategic visioning for the program, just as sort of we had last year. We had it in sort of a two-part. So that's the intention at this point. And a lot of that has shifted since last month because of juries and other things going on. But we'll likely have it also on for there. Just a reminder, we do have a vacancy on the Arts and Culture Commission. So that vacancy has been announced, but if there are folks in your lives that you want to encourage to apply, or anyone listening would like to apply, the application is available on the City of Urbana's Boards and Commissions webpage. And we invite you to apply at your earliest convenience. We'd love to hear from you.
okay. And we do not have any public input, correct? Okay. Let's go ahead and move to the staff report then.
Okay, I'm gonna share my screen here. Okay, this is your February staff report from the Arts and Culture program. Main things I want to touch on are, of course, our usual. We continue to work remotely as staff. As I said in our previous meeting, Heather Ann's still joining us to do minutes at our meeting and is assisting with the grant program, but has also had a promotion to office specialist for the city's community development department. And so we'll still continue to work with arts and culture, but on a perhaps more limited basis once we're through the bulk of the grant program time. We continue to have some students that are working with us through the University of Illinois, Parkland College, and the Urbana High School Executive Internship Program. So those students are completing internships with us. We have a total of 5 interns right now, and we have 2 volunteers who are also high school students who've wanted to volunteer on a more limited basis with the program.
Hey, Rachel. Sorry to interrupt. In the attendees, I see Stacy and Courtney. I don't know if our UPG folks are looking at them, but they're both as attendees.
Oh, yes. And, okay. And Stephanie. So we need to let some people in. Are they in a waiting room or have they joined us?
They're as showing as attendees. They're not panelists right now.
Shall I go run in there and check with him?
It looks like Jason's adding people.
Jason's not here. His assistant is here today.
Oh, right. Well, the assistant, I believe, is adding people.
Okay.
Yep.
They got Stacy.
Here we go.
Courtney.
You're also welcome to add well, I don't know if I don't know how we're treating folks with the webinar, but Natalie West is an intern of ours, and Stephanie McMahon is the Economic Development Coordinator. Okay, well, I'll keep going for now. So as I mentioned, we have a number of our events continue to be hybrid. Some are adapted. A lot of virtual things are going on. And some of our events that have been impacted by suspensions are continuing then as currently suspended. And those include things like our Art at the Market and some of the other programs, which I'll actually mention more as we go into our annual review. Let's begin with the best news, which has to do a lot with our grants. Sorry, folks, I'm having some hard times with my computer. One second. Okay, so great news. We're in the bulk of the grant program right now. We had 49 applications received this grant cycle of 2021. That's actually only a little less than our usual. So I knew we would have less, but I wasn't sure how much during this time of COVID-19. Total, they requested $137,000 in grant funding, a little over that. We have up to $90,000 available. The Arts and Culture Program grant applications are currently under review with independent juries comprised of community members selected for their diverse expertise and experience in Urbana's local arts and culture. We also have 4 of you on the commission also contributing to those juries, and so I'm grateful to you for your service there. Notice will be given to all grantees the week of February 16th. And just to put it on your radar, we will be having a virtual sneak peek celebration as we've had in the past. And that celebration will take place on March 5th. It's a Friday at 5 p.m. So please put that on your calendars, because that would be, that's really our annual event every year that it is just wonderful to have Arts and Culture Commissioners be present at as well. Grantees from the 2020 cycle continue to work with us to address planning issues arising in the wake of COVID-19. So we have a few people that will be certainly wrapping up grants from even 2019 and 20 as the months roll on, some of whom have asked for extensions, but most all have some sort of plan in place and are able to move forward at this point. Want to mention that we continue art inspired highlights with the Urbana Free Library, and this is also a call for art. We're always looking for more people to feature. This is an invitation for artists who are local to share what inspires them and be featured every Monday through our social media pages. Now, I also have to sing the praises of our new Poet Laureate, Ashanti Files. She's truly hit the ground running. We were able to have a kind of virtual reception on January 21st. Thank you to those of you who were able to come. The virtual reception featured brief remarks from Mayor Diane Wolf Marlin, myself, and the former Poet Laureate Will Rieger, as well as a brief speech of sorts from Ashanti Files. The virtual reception was well attended, and in addition to general public, we had representatives from local poetry groups, educational programs, city staff, and our own commissioners. The Poet Laureates actually had already a robust calendar of media, radio spots and television and newspaper, but also has some upcoming engagements that I particularly want to put on your radar. The first is here coming up on February 12th. The end of this week, we're going to be having a Poet Laureate listening session. So we did this again with our inaugural Poet Laureate, and we're excited to continue it as a tradition where members of the public can talk to the Poet Laureate about what they'd like to see out of her tenure and any suggestions of things that they have for what could improve our poetry scene. On March 2nd, we will be doing a sort of video drop of what has been historically our Black Herstory Slam. It typically is an event that has coincided with Open Scene, kind of on the cusp of Black History Month and Women's History Month, and we've done it traditionally as a live event. In this time of COVID-19, it's going to be hosted by Poet Laureate Ashanti Files, but it'll feature different pre-recorded videos with local Black women poets. And then on May 3rd, this is a long way off, from 12 to 1 p.m., she will be featured as a panelist on a lunch program called Dish It Up at the University of Illinois. We do have a number of other engagements that you'll see popping up, whose dates are still being solidified, but quite a few things coming up for our Poet Laureate and invitations for her to really make a lot of impact in after-school programs and as part of curriculum at the schools. We already have arrangements for her to visit Urbana High School and University Laboratory High School, and she obviously runs her middle school program out of the middle school, but we expect to see big impact in the schools as well. Now, of course, I have to mention our Youth Poet Laureate program. We are still accepting applications, and there's been a lot of movement as far as our staff for trying to get and elicit more applications over this past month. So I personally have visited Urbana High School, multiple classes and their art club, and University Laboratory High School, multiple classes and their Arts Honor Society. And in both instances, really working to encourage people to apply. I've also reached out to teachers, encouraging them to nominate their students, and after school programs, encouraging them to nominate their students. And I've had a lot more interest in buzz and just general questions. So I'm hoping that we'll continue to get some more applications for that. Let's move on to Young Artist Studio. This is a collaboration again with the Urbana Free Library. For our next upcoming workshop, we will actually be featuring our intern, Natalie West, who's on our call today. She will be helping us celebrate Lunar New Year with Kids Create Chinese Paper Fans, where she'll do a paper fan creation, and then also there'll be an opportunity to learn a fan dance in honor of Chinese New Year on Sunday, February 21st. All upcoming Young Artist Studio workshops remain virtual until further notice, and those do continue monthly. I'm excited to report that works on display as part of the Great Outdoors, though de-installed, are starting to pop up in indoor places over these winter months. So work submitted that first cycle, and our committee, which is comprised of representatives from Spurlock Museum, the Urbana Park District, the Champaign Park District, our program, and 40 North Champaign County Arts Council, have been meeting and working together to get the call together for the next launch of this program. Spurlock has generously donated $10,000 again towards the creation of the sustainability of this program. So we'll be working together again to do a new call for art. And what's exciting is this time around, we're able to do this call earlier. So you'll actually see it pop up in the next couple of weeks. And then people will have much more time to kind of put things together. And our hope is that we can have them installed earlier in the summer so that they can actually be up through fall all the way until winter hits and we need to deinstall. So I'm very excited that that plan will continue. We will be exploring potentially some different parks, but in particular also we'll retain having a work of art at each community garden that was featured last cycle. And we will still have the community feature of CU Outdoors. This has been lovely. We had the middle school at Urbana do some associated programming through their art teachers with this, and we're really hoping that it continues to be a way for members of the public to consider putting art in their public walkways and their lawns and things like that in order to share public art. Art for Nourishment, though it has experienced some delays, is still going forward. This is our program partnering with food distribution programs to share creative work of local artists in the spirit of community and connection. We are working with the Bucket Brigade, Silver Hearts, and Tiger Market of Urbana School District 116. The holidays put a shift in our timeline, but we're going to be having this launch very soon and very excited about this program. While our Artist of the Quarter exhibitions, I mentioned them here, but they do remain closed. We've had sort of a waiting game with whether or not the library's reopening might allow for some other exhibits to happen. But in the meantime, we have been doing quite a bit in the realm of digital exhibits. And our newest is a collaboration that we're calling Pandemics as the Portal to Change. This is a collaboration with the Krannert Art Museum, the Museum of the Grand Prairie, the Urbana Free Library, and the Urbana-Champaign Independent Media Center to present a new call for artworks from a wide array of artistic mediums. You heard me talk over the summer as we had plotted a sort of teen artists reimagine the world. This is kind of a riff on that idea, since that sort of morphed into this. And what's happened now is that we have this program, which is going to be for people middle school and older, but all the way through adults, through seniors. And we're encouraging anyone to consider pandemics as a way to reimagine what our world ought to look like, a sort of a confrontation, and what happens next, what comes next is for us to imagine through the arts. So there's a very open call for a wide array of artistic mediums, visual art, performance, or experimental works from adults and youth, middle school and up. And the formal call for art should be released just later this month. There'll be a digital video exhibit, and artworks will be then archived at the Museum of the Grand Prairie. And there's also some possibilities of eventual in-person exhibits with Krannert Art Museum. So that's a new kind of larger initiative coming from those partners working collaboratively. Since last meeting, I was able to meet with representatives from Public Art League. We all got a little caught up, and I'm very excited that we'll have some more news very soon, particularly as it relates to our selection of What is the Good by Gregory Stallmeyer and our hopes to place it in Urbana. We're currently taking stock of reaching out to the artists that have works currently on display to see what their needs are and when they'd like to deinstall, if they'd like to deinstall, and what may be possible in terms of retaining any of the pieces here for at least a little longer. Of course, I'd also like to mention the Imagine Urbana Comprehensive Plan. This continues to be an initiative, obviously, that will be very huge and continues to be huge for the city. And in the realm of the arts, we're really just wanting to figure out ways that we can help solicit public input, including things like our visioning for today, but all kinds of activities that we do that might be opportunities for the public to share what they'd like to see for our arts and cultural scene. Shout out to Stacy for being featured in that video that came out about Imagine Urbana and repping the arts. That was wonderful. And I really hope to be able to share with you, hopefully by next month, some information about the kinds of events that we'll be able to do that will serve as listening sessions or art creative ways for people to share their insights. And last but not least at all is our continued effort to really keep informed of different relief opportunities. Staff continue to work getting the word out about any business support that we see, any artist relief programs that we see. And I currently have one of our interns is going through our page on the city's website to just ensure that it is very up to date with all current links, making sure any past deadlines are updated, things are taken off if needed, or things added. So that's something that we just continue to do to try to get the word out to artists about possible relief programs that are available to them. And at this time, I'd like to take any questions you have.
Okay. Well, if there aren't any questions, then I guess we can go ahead and move to the annual visioning for Urbana Arts and Culture.
Sure. Would you like to do that vote now that I think we have enough people to do it?
Let's go ahead and do that. Yeah, this is just a vote for approval of minutes. And we have to do it by roll call, so.
Do we have a motion, Pat?
Yeah, we already had the motion in the second.
Okay.
Heather Ann, are you on the call? There you are.
I am. I apologize. I did not catch earlier who gave the motion and who gave
it was Frank, I believe. Is that right?
I gave the motion and Frank seconded.
Right. Yep, that.
Thank you. Okay, so minute approval. Ms. Salmon?
Aye.
Ms. Bax?
Aye.
Ms. Headland?
Aye.
Mr. Miller?
Yes.
Mr. Modica?
Yes.
Janelle's not here. Gonzalo's not here. Mr. Robinson?
Aye.
All right, thank you.
And I believe that was quorum enough for that to have passed.
It was. Yep.
That's
Great.
Thank you.
Okay, well, we
Okay,
can
I'm
go
happy
ahead.
to go forward with the annual visioning. So for anyone who just joined, I mentioned that I'm really hoping that this will kind of kick us off and we'll be able to continue this conversation in sort of a two-part way like we had last year. As I was pulling information together and in the midst of our grant program, I'm just thinking it'll be beneficial for us to split this up into two meetings. But I'm really hoping that we can have a dialogue this evening and be able to present just some grounding data and information that can help us as we vision going forward. One of the things that was really wonderful is that Pat Salmon was willing to also tell us again a little bit of the history. Now, Pat and Barbara put together a wonderful presentation last year, and I'm going to pull that presentation up. And of course, I mean, correct me if I'm wrong, Pat, but I'm sure you don't mind Barbara also jumping in and sharing
No, not at
anecdotes
all.
and insights there.
I can remember.
So, yeah.
A lot of history.
It's been a while.
Let me just, I had a computer crash issue right before I came on, and I'm realizing that the PowerPoint
Uh-oh.
is not up here. So I actually need probably like 2 minutes to sort that out. So do you mind if we take a 2-minute pause real quick, and I'll try to pull that up? Unless it's accessible for you, Pat. I know you wanted me to do it, right?
Yeah, no, I would appreciate it if you would, because it's not on this tablet, so.
Okay. I'm wondering something. Are you able to forward that? I'm having some, sorry, I apologize. I am having a lot of technical difficulties today because my computer crashed, and this is a different computer. So it had not a lot of things I was working on it. So I'm wondering, are you able to forward that email?
I wish I could, but my computer also crashed today.
Oh, okay. Hold on just one quick moment and let me grab it.
Hang on 1 second. My husband's.
No, I got it fixed.
Oh, you did get it fixed?
Yeah, it turned off right.
Okay, yeah, let me just send that to you again, just to your regular.
Yeah, I think actually if you're able to send it to my Gmail, that would be even better.
Oh, okay. Do I have that? Yeah, I should. Okay, I'll do that and be right back.
Turned off.
Okay.
Oh, you turned it off?
Yeah.
In the meantime, folks, I want to remind you that the questions that I sent out in advance of today's discussion were really just a kind of jumping off point to get you thinking. I want to reiterate them really quick because they can also maybe ground your thinking as we look at the history and this past year. So just to remind you, those questions were, what do you see as the strongest support our program offers towards advancing arts and culture in the city of Urbana? So if you could name one thing you think we do that is strongest, what would that be? Given our circumstances with COVID-19 and restrictions on our programs, how might we refocus how we advance public art in Urbana? This has obviously been a big question for anybody doing programming. And then given our commitment to culture, how would you like the program to amplify cultural work and cultural workers in Urbana? And evaluating our own commitment to diversity and inclusion, what populations are we serving and who is not yet being met by our arts and cultural programming? How do you want to see us grow in our commitment? So that is just some questions to get you thinking, and I hope that you were able to consider those questions over our time together. Okay, I'll pull up this other. Oh, you know what, Pat? I got it.
Good.
I don't know if she's gone. Well, let me screen share. And I was able to get it again. So hopefully she hasn't gone too far. And for those of you who were part of last year, which I believe is all of us, it'll be familiar to you. I apologize for the day of technical difficulties.
We didn't even have all this when we started the commission.
Well, that'll be part of the story.
Oh,
Pat, I
she found it.
apologize. Thank you. I actually have it. Can you hear me?
Yes.
We're
you hear?
queued up.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, you'd have to wait a long time for my computer.
It's all right. I apologize for the confusion on my part.
That's all right.
No, it's all right. So
Yeah.
I'm going to hand it off to you, and Barbara, feel free to jump in, but I think Pat's going to take the lead.
Okay, why don't you move to the next screen? Okay, the commission started out with a task force. It first met in March 2007. Chair was Danielle Chenoweth. And you can just see some of the other names there. I won't read those to you, but you see that Barbara's there. Barbara really is the one who's been on the commission the longest. You can go ahead. Yeah, you can go ahead.
Can I make a comment?
Yeah, sure.
Maybe some of you have seen the announcement of the wonderful award that dancer and educator Cynthia Oliver received this week.
Yes.
You notice her name was on one of the founding members of the commission.
Yeah, I appreciated you making that comment too.
If you back
That's
up that
wonderful
last
news.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, the task force developed a mission statement and collected input from local businesses, artists, and art organizations, put it into this community input report. Go ahead. As you can see, some people were not in favor of the commission. There's a couple of editorials from the News Gazette, but it was funded in June 2008. Go ahead.
Mm-hmm.
Anna Hochhalder was the first coordinator, and her position was only half-time. So if you go to the next screen, you'll see that some of the people on the commission were doing some of the legwork simply because it had to be done. Commission members were required to be on at least one subcommittee. One or two members were on each subcommittee. And those subcommittees did research and costing for new projects or program additions. And then proposals were made at annual program review meetings, similar to what the kind of meeting we're doing today. And you can just see some of the sample types of subcommittees we had at that point. Barb, did you have? Okay, go ahead.
No, I was just looking to see the remembering while you were talking, and I remember the ones I was on.
Yeah. Okay, you can go ahead. Okay, of course, one of the biggest first programs was the grants, and that was developed together with Sarah Ross, who was a local artist at that time. She's since moved to Chicago. Michelle Plant, who's still working at the university, and myself. You can go ahead. Also, I think even preceding us was the Urbana Sculpture Project. I think it may have started even before the commission started. And as usual, it was doing what we do now, which is, choosing and installing sculptures. Go ahead. Then Artists of the Corridor was one of the things that was founded early. And I think you've all been to that before. Go ahead. And Art in the Market was also one of the early programs. And I started UPTV Art Now, and at that time it was a half hour, and it was an in-person interview. Sometimes we did things where we'd actually look at artists doing work. Like at one point there was a potter I was working with, and he was actually making the pots while we talked. So it was kind of fun to do that. Go ahead. Now, we also had a number of programs we tried to start and didn't really become successful. We had an idea for a storefront gallery. At that point, downtown had a lot of open storefronts unoccupied. So we thought it would be a good place to put in a lot of art. We did run into some problems with liability and getting electricity in these storefronts and so on, so that did not happen. Urbana Space Program was simply trying to find spaces for artists, whether they were theater or visual artists, whatever, to work in. Corridor beautification had to do with the fact that that time the boneyard was being worked on, and you all know the section that's been completed, but there were plans for further beautification farther down the boneyard, and we were working on ideas for that. Cooperative theater storage was an idea for local theater groups to have some place where they could store anything they were working with, their props, their stage, anything that they needed for their work. Outdoor projector was an idea of mine. I'd love to see that happen someday. The idea was that we would project some art on the building that's right next to the parking garage in downtown. And then there was also an idea for an art lecture series where various local artists would come and talk. I think we did have a few of those lectures, but I think whoever was supporting that series left the commission, and so it did not happen after that. So anyway, for any of those that didn't happen, we just kept the unused funds and we added it to the next year's budget. Go ahead. Anna left in 2011. She was followed by a series of coordinators. You can just kind of go through these quickly. There's Christina McClelland, Lisa Hatchadorian, Pauline Tanos, and then Morgan White filled in a little bit while Pauline had left, and we were trying to find a new person to fill in. Go ahead. One of the big things we did in later years was the Boneyard Creek crossing. Now the commission is supposed to get 1% of budget for any city projects that are over $750,000. And so this was one of those. We worked with Jack Mackey, who was a Seattle artist who has gone around the nation doing work on public art. And he helped us develop the ideas for the wall tiles, the concrete form liners that you can see in the walls, and some sandblasted forms that are little round
Springtails.
The springtails. That's what's in the concrete form liners. And then there's also some they're round, I don't even know what to call them. They're like coasters, but they're in the ground and they have various things represented from the area.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah.
Sort of natural to the ecosystem
Natural
there, but
to the
reflected in the
ecosystem.
art.
Correct.
Mhm.
Yeah. Okay, why don't you go to the next one? Then we also worked with a sculptor on creating the Martin Luther King sculpture. That was a collaboration with the Urbana Park District, and that is in the Martin Luther King Park. Barb, were you on that one?
Yes.
You want to say anything about that, or?
I'm just trying to remember. We had a wonderful day, a very sunny day when we had the installation, and I remember taking pictures and posting a bunch of them on Facebook. I'm sure they're still there. They're under my page, but Preston Jackson, and then he was involved with other projects with us.
Right.
It was very effective.
Okay.
This is a gorgeous sculpture, and it also is one that I think is on the mind of maybe we have talked before with the park district about and the city about, like, could we do something to make it more accessible by walk, since there's no sidewalk that walks straight to it.
Mm-hmm.
You have to cross some grass, which is fine, but then it also is kind of placed on this corner where it's viewable by streetcars, which is wonderful. But the beauty of this sculpture is really to be experienced up close, because it's got lots of intricate detail in the story, or storytelling in its detail. So it's one that I'm kind of eyeing of, like, maybe it should move, like maybe it should go travel somewhere else or something, because it has it could really benefit from being somewhere where people can walk right up to it, or otherwise have maybe some landscaping or something help it be that people are invited more to walk up real close to it.
Yeah, I would agree with you on that.
I can remember at the time there was also a lot of renovation going on with that park and the school as well, and some murals were added, and that was part of the time when we were really trying to improve the North Corridor, the entranceway, welcoming people to the city. And so it was good where it was in that regard, because it was.
Well, and now we have this mural put together by Lisa Kessler in the Urbana Park District of the likeness of Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. and the painted in part by youth participating in Park District programs and neighborhood children that's now on display. And interestingly enough, they were able to get, as I understand the history, permissions to use MLK's likeness, whereas Preston Jackson, I understand, actually struggled to do that and didn't get those permissions.
Yeah.
So it was an example of like, here's where the community got permission to do this, and now we, like, King Park really does have a lot of things that root the history of civil rights and like Martin Luther King Jr. It's really nice there. And when I've thought about like, well, where could it maybe move, I think a little bit about King School or somewhere where it could be really in the area where people would be walking past and be able to go up real close and still have that connection.
Yeah, I think it's a good idea.
Maybe we need to create some events in the park.
Mm-hmm.
So
Yeah.
That too.
Okay, also for a while we tried to have a guide to local art classes, which I pretty much did, and I think it was helpful to people, but it was a lot of work because things are changing in this area all the time. So we did finally abandon that after a couple of years. So
We have currently some version of this on our website, and it's another task I want to give an intern to take a look at as we're going through our website pages, because we went through it last year and did a full update, but with COVID-19, we haven't revisited it, and I'm sure a lot of things are either happening differently or not happening potentially.
right, yeah, I'd still like to see it. I think it's still a good idea, but it's a
Yeah.
lot of work. Okay. Other new programs that were developed were Art in the Schools, Murals on Glass, which is the one that's on the parking garage, and also on the Park District building. And let's see what else. There were some format changes to Art Now. It now is only 15 minutes, and it is pretty much told in the artist's own words rather than having it as an on-screen interview. And then Art Expo, which was our art fair that we were supporting in the fall. I don't know, that's kind of been suspended. I don't know if we'll continue that or not. And then of course we developed a number of partnerships. I'm sure there's even more partnerships than what you see here, but these are some of the big ones that we did.
That Art Expo, just a comment, part of the reason we're kind of in abeyance is not just the quarantine, or the pandemic, but because the building, as I understand it, is
right
condemned or was going to be torn down, and something was going to go in that space, so we couldn't continue it in that
right.
regard either.
Yeah, that was part of the problem too. We couldn't really find another space to replace it that seemed to fit the bill. So.
But it was well attended the first couple of years we tried it.
Oh yeah,
Well,
absolutely.
and now 40 North and the Park District are collaborating on Crystal Lake Park Art Fair, which I think has been, it's served to fill that void by being an outdoor event. Mm-hmm.
Right. Okay, and then this is from last year, but I think these still hold. Some of the future challenges we might have would be intentionally planning and supporting cultural programs and events. And I know that's something you had in your questions.
Mm-hmm.
I think it would be helpful for us, again, to try to, just as we did at the very beginning of this, to get some more input from artists in the communities about their needs. I'd like to see if there are ways we can ensure the funding if the city budget shrinks. I have to say, you've done a wonderful job of getting us money for the grants. It's terrific. I just hope that we can have that continue in the future. Then I think we'd also like to continue trying to get the word out just about the commission and our programs. We have so many great programs, but I'm not sure how many the general public knows about.
Mm-hmm.
And then finally, I just want to make sure we don't exceed, Rachel, your capacity to handle the programs.
That's real.
Yeah, especially now that you're not going to have an assistant, it's going to be a little more difficult. So that's it.
Thank you, Pat.
Thank you so much.
Sure.
I'm going to stop sharing for a second and ask if there's, so I really appreciate sharing this presentation again, because, I've only heard it once. I'm sure most of you around the table only heard it once, and it was at roughly exactly this time last year. And I actually think it's good for us to revisit our history as we look towards our future. Invaluable to see how the program has changed or taken shape over the last few years. Any questions for either Pat or Barbara? who have been here through these years and really have seen it in all of its formation. I think that wisdom is really invaluable. So I'd like to ask anybody else if you have questions for either of them.
Being a really young person on the commission, I know we've had a few rounds. I guess I'm not that young, but
Pardon me.
younger, I guess. I would be interested, pandemic aside, before that happens. I hadn't spent a lot of time on the commission. I think I was maybe a year, I want to say. I'm not quite sure when we because I remember I missed this. I caught the second half of it, but I missed the original presentation because we did it in the wine in analog.
In analog.
Yeah.
So you guys have been around for a long time, so I'm interested to hear, what would your wisdom be to somebody like me who's, young and, looking to see what they can do with something like this, with my role on this commission and how, I'm going to attract other young folks. We have an open position. I know a gazillion people who are involved in the arts here who are my age locally, who I could probably reach out to about this, and I'm trying to think about, how do I sell that to them? Like, well, you could be involved in this commission and we could do X, Y, and Z cool things. I don't know, just interested on your thoughts as to where we are from where you guys started pre-pandemic. Were we going in a way that you saw was good? Do we need to seek young voices to help bring that light there? What do you guys think about that?
Barb, do you want to go first?
Yeah, we've had a lot of changes. We've grown a lot. The quality of the programs and presentations has gotten stronger. Maybe we're, as the word got out, we had certainly got more variety, and that helped. So one of the things is always just to keep tooting our own horn and being good ambassadors. I like the variety of experiences and age groups and interests in the arts by serving on the commission. I think it's good to blend all of that energy together. It's hard to say. In some ways, Jared, you were talking about trying to remember. In a way, I think all of us feel like last year was a blur, waiting through the pandemic. I don't know. We've grown a lot. I feel good about sticking it out. It changed certainly a lot from what I was expecting it to be, and the pace has picked up as well. In the beginning, I know some people got off because the pace was a little slow and we were still exploring, and they wanted things to happen a little bit quicker, but we were still evolving. So now we play catch up a little bit, and we're doing a lot of things. So that's a really, to look back and say where we've come is good.
Yeah, I think Rachel has greatly expanded the program since she's come in. And part of that, of course, is that she is working full time. You have to remember that most of the other coordinators were working either half time or I think maybe 3/4 time when we got toward the, later. But so a lot of it was a little more amateurish, I think, because we were just kind of winging it on our own and trying to find our way and try to figure out what we could actually do and what we could accomplish, and especially with limited resources. I think that's one of the reasons, for instance, that Art Now developed, because it was cheap. It was something that we could do without any resources. Now we've got quite a bit more in resources, so I think we have more possibilities. And especially, I think what young people might be able to bring is ideas, and bring those to Rachel and work with her to shape new things. So if that's how you want to promote this to someone, I think that would be the strong point, that they could bring new ideas in. But, again, you do have to remember that everything does have to go through Rachel. It's not like we can go out on our own and do you have to understand from
But I don't stand in between great ideas. It's something that.
No, I'm not saying that.
But Yeah, and I know we have a history of things like more formalized subcommittees, but one thing I always
Oh, yeah.
want to encourage is that even without those things more formalized as a part of the program now, it is always possible for people to not just serve on juries or things that you all have done or attend events, but to really, you know, tell me, hey, I really want to work on this particular program with you. I would delight in your service and your volunteerism in that direction. So, you know, or if you have an idea for something new and you'd really like to help take the lead on like spearheading it, I am all about collaboration and partnership. And so
Right.
that just really thrills me. And, you know, things like Frank, what you've been able to do with us around disability and our listening sessions and things like that. You know, the ways that that across the board, I've worked with different folks around our commission in different endeavors. I'd really like to see that grow personally. I don't need to reinstigate necessarily formalized subcommittees, but I'd love to have
Oh,
you
no.
involved in just the planning of things, you know, if you want to be. Frank?
Yeah, Frank?
I have a question for Pat and Barb. And what has helped maintain your participation and enthusiasm working on the commission all these years?
Wanted to see it happen, wanted to make our town, I've lived here a long time and I wanted to keep our community strong and growing and keep the arts growing, encourage more people to come and be here and enjoy downtown. And, you know, there was a spirit of competition when we first started too, because there was a lot of growth in downtown Champaign, and we were afraid that too many of the younger generation was going to downtown Champaign to spend their disposable time and dollars. And we wanted to create scenarios where people would come and be enthusiastic about Urbana. So some of that was competitive spirit. But for me, I've always been in the arts, and so I've always wanted to maintain a strong community.
Mm-hmm.
I think Champaign-Urbana in general has just grown greatly in the arts since we first started. You know, not just us, but 40 North, and just even the interest has grown much more since it started in 2007. I think the thing that keeps me going, honestly, is, you know, one thing is I can see in the community the things that we've done. I mean, I look around and it's like, I remember that. I remember when we did that. You know, it's just kind of self-reinforcing after a while.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Now, one thing that your question, Jared, also made me remember is that, you know, we did have former council person Julie Lout raised the question to us about having even like a teen representative on various commissions. And I thought that was a pretty remarkable idea, and one that would be quite lovely, even if it wasn't our nine board members, but a 10th position that we always have for a teen. Could be a really interesting way to also have teen influence on our Arts and Culture Commission. We've had some different things over the past year, not just with the teens that are joining us for the call today who are serving as interns with the program, but also with our teen artist check-in listening session that we did with teens, or some of these other outreach efforts we did with teens in the community this past year. It's really made me want to do more where teens are giving direct feedback about what they want to see and what they want to grow in the community. And that could be one way to have a different voice join us, you know, from a younger generation than any of us represented here.
I would imagine they wouldn't have any voting rights though, because of their age.
It would require, yeah, I'm sure it would require revising our bylaws in some way, and it would require working with the clerk's office on all of that. But that's certainly something, or even city council. I don't know if it would have to go formally through city council, very likely. But if that's something that the Arts Commission would want to pursue, it's certainly something I could look into.
Well, I think
it's a great idea.
Yeah, the influence of your interns have greatly added in a positive way as well.
I agree.
And I think too, I remember we always had to have everything approved by city council. We didn't have complete control over the money for a while. And that's changed in a positive way, I think, in the last couple of years.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I've also seen some partnerships developing
Yeah.
from different groups. And I think I'd like to, that's one of my visions for is to continue to encourage partnerships so people can have different kinds of programs that they might not be able to do on an individual basis, but by putting their resources together, they could.
Absolutely. Courtney or Stacy, do either of you have any questions for Barb or Pat?
No, I'm sorry. Go ahead, Courtney.
I just said no.
Okay.
No, I think some of the things that I would have had questions about were already answered, and I actually kind of amending my answers based on some of those things about those 4 questions. So it's interesting to see how the committee has grown and the efforts have grown over these years since the beginning. So this is, you know, I feel like that in a particular way kind of addresses these questions as well. Like some of these are kind of already, it's speaking like there's a legacy that's already been proved, that's being proven consistently over the years. And I don't know what, I'll save the answers, but no, I think everything that I would have wanted to ask was actually already addressed.
Okay.
I think we've been able to attract more people to our events too. That was one of the criteria we looked for, was to make sure that that events were created that really drew a lot of people, reached a wide range in the community, not just a specific group, but targeted more of the community members.
I think it's valuable, like how much it's grown, and what I can do next that I've planned is to share with you some of the things that we discussed this time last year. So where did we land with some of our visioning? And what I won't be able to get to in enough depth that I'd like to pick up with next year is really helping facilitate a robust critique and evaluation of our programs. Like how well are they meeting these visions that we have, and then our mission statement. And it's something that, just given the juries and everything that's been going on this month, it's been very hard for me to tackle that as deeply as I'd like to do. So I didn't bring that completely, but I have some initial thoughts I can share with you. And what I'd like to do is, if that's all right, is I'll screen share now, and I'll share a little bit about where we settled last year, just to refresh our memories of what this conversation when we did visioning last year was like. And this is all like mere weeks before COVID-19 hit, and like everything was thrown out the window. So, but it's, I think, helpful for us to remember. Okay, so let me go all the way up here. So can you all see my screen? Okay, so I really just wanted to share some of the things that we focused on last year. So we had kind of 3 different foci for last year. One was brainstorming on how to amplify cultural work in and outside of our program. Evaluating the Tier 3 grant process was a particular conversation for us last year. And then brainstorming any new initiatives to take on in this past year that of course was quite thrown due to COVID-19. So this is what came up in our conversation last year. I literally went, rewatched the conversation, looked at all of the surveys that you filled out, and I tried to summarize some of our thinking. So our first priority, this is all taken directly from our vision and mission statements, was celebrate and nurture artistic and cultural diversity in Urbana. You all identified the programs that do that in a very key way to you to be Art Now, the Urbana Arts Grant Program, and all that we're able to fund, like the very strong diversity of things we're able to fund. Open Scene, Open Mic, Young Artist Studio, the Belongings exhibition that featured stories from local immigrants, and hires directly by our program. So people who are contracted to do things like host Open Scene or lead a Young Artist Studio, that really also help showcase our diversity. And I think it's in, so both thematic, like what we've done when we've had Open Scene, Open Mics that focus on artists impacted by incarceration, or artists who identify as teens, or people who are, you know, elders, or we focus on different kinds of issues within a particular Open Scene. That could be an example. Young Artist Studio, when we've been able to feature arts practices that really span a wide variety of cultures and identity groups, and also, of course, artistic traditions. And then like who we featured on Art Now. So that was a conversation last year where we talked about, you know, we featured the oldest person we've ever featured on Art Now last year. And that the prior year we had featured artists with disabilities, young artists, like really just trying to amplify and change up how we prioritize people who've been historically underserved. So artists of color, how many artists of color are we reaching out to and are central to the way that we've designed our programs, for instance. So these were kind of some of the core ways that you had identified that we've been doing that work. Our second priority was offering community members opportunities for creative expression. So regardless of whether you identify personally as an artist or maybe not consider yourself a professional artist, how do you see opportunities for you? So we talked about Open Scene, Open Mic being a place where anyone can come and express themselves. The Urbana Sculpture Program and the mural program being things that people can apply to be a part of. And of course, we've added to that, you know, poems on glass and utility boxes and all these other initiatives now. Artist of the Corridor is a place where you as an artist can come, or even like a classroom can do an exhibition. Urbana's Downtown Get Down offered vendor spots, musical acts, gig opportunities, but also our pop-up things and our Maker Lab spaces offered a lot of opportunity for people to engage or showcase their work. Certainly our Urbana Poet Laureate is a new one, and our Art at the Market. Now on these past two slides, I want to make notice of a couple of things. Now in this time of COVID-19, the two most impacted programs on here have been Art at the Market and Artist of the Corridor. I would say also Open Scene, but to some degree we've been able to partner with Sounds Like Community and continue that to a degree, and we're hoping to have every few Sounds Like Community programs at the IMC morph into kind of a Open Scene Sounds Like Community, since both efforts are kind of similar and they are from the same two partners, us and the Urbana-Champaign Independent Media Center. Artists of the Corridor has morphed and adapted in this time of COVID-19 as virtual exhibitions. So are things like Art in the Time of Quarantine, or you know, Pandemics as a Portal to Change, or Haiku from Home. These are all initiatives of this past year where we've been able to morph that, and actually did a closing as a digital exhibit of Paula McCarty's work, whose work was on display at the city building until frankly recently, because the city building's been closed, and her work went up right before COVID started, at least shelter in place started here. You all identified for priority 3, building creative public spaces, as some of the things that help that the most are business partnerships to help local businesses envision themselves as venues. That was really key. So we talked a lot about how things like Open Scene, or even our arts grants, or having events that move around quite a bit through our program, since we don't have our own brick and mortar space. Like having our events take place everywhere actually helps businesses envision themselves as venues if they haven't already. Identified some of the things like the garden space at Cunningham Township. I think our partnership was one of the first events that Cunningham Township had that was a bigger event in their garden. Pop-up performances and open mics help identify new and emerging artists. So those tend to be places where maybe the artists who've been hired before go, but it's also a place to really discover people who haven't necessarily been hired by some of our programs before, whether it's us or 40 North or the Park District or any of us that do a lot of booking regularly. So it's a nice way to have new and emerging artists show up. Grant workshops and other gatherings offering networking opportunities for artists. I found that my grant workshops are actually some of the best places for artists to meet and to like hear about each other's projects and even potentially start collaborating together. I love that aspect of some of the things that we've been able to do actually virtually this past year, and they've really been able to still have that same impact in connecting people. And then one of the things that we talked about for quite a while at our meeting last year was what would we want to see? So we had, these are some of your responses. More partnership with social, religious, or institutional organizations. So just increasing our partnerships overall. There was an identification that doing so, working with social service agencies, for instance, working with religious institutions, might help us reach more cultural and socioeconomic diversity. Pat, this transparently came from you, but it was the idea of let's find places for more video and animation. You know, Pat working and very clearly in projection and the arts, that's clearly you. And I'm so excited about it. I'm really hoping that this is our year. Expansion of language services. So you all identified like bilingual and trilingual programs, not simply putting our marketing in those programs, but really working to see if we can hire and have people performing language services at our programs. Identifying and reflecting Urbana's cultural diversity, so growing connections with local cultural programs, local businesses, cultural centers. More family-friendly programming, and then it was also talked about, but let's strike the balance, because sometimes when we do too much family programming, we become like the family arts program and not necessarily something where it's meeting the needs of young people who are older or teens that don't want to spend time with their family sometimes and want to just be with other teens, or, you know, nightlife type things that aren't so family friendly. So really trying to find a way to strike a good balance. We talked about having dynamic metrics of impact. So how do we go beyond head counts to develop to kind of assess the impact of our programs? Support for pop-ups, potential venues, emerging artists, and unique partnerships. So this was a kind of a free form part of our dialogue where folks were just tossing out different things that we see artists as really needing. So how do we help artists all along the way through things like workshops or panels to support artist education, building a business, seeking gigs, finding collaborators. And then another one that's transparently Barbara was a Ravinia style outdoor concert series. I just think it was a lovely idea. And you mentioned that this had actually taken place for many years in Champaign and hadn't existed in a while. So what is a struggle for me is that I loved all of these ideas, and of course was really hoping to do things that would help allow for them to emerge. And then of course we were struck with COVID-19 really impacting our ability and shaping our thinking around events. We had a suspension of the programs and some other things, of course, with special events that just made it really challenging to move forward. I also asked you to do kind of a SWOT analysis of our program, and these are not everyone's answers, but the next few slides really just identified some different strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats you saw to our program, and hardly anyone could see many threats, so I don't remember if I finished that slide. But strengths identify were things like the welcoming and supportive attitudes of staff, paperwork seemed thorough, boundless opportunities for the arts organizations, and cultural work. We have a landmark grant program supporting arts and culture in Urbana, and a dynamic lineup of programs that really seem to offer a little something for everyone. Weaknesses was a desire for commissioners to have more orientation and training, I think as it relates to your commissioner's duty. Now we've since had at least an OMA training, I believe, so I don't know if that feeling has maybe shifted a little bit, but that was something that came up last year. A desire for more timeliness of notices, more time to read information, desire for more input from the community on large scale events. So especially when it comes to things like festivals, how do we encourage public input, probably not just on our programs, but even on the things that we fund that could help shape things like steering committees or partnerships. Opportunities was desire for more work with underserved populations, providing multilingual or cultural celebration programming, a desire to engage different folks that we haven't maybe partnered with yet. So one of the couple of the ones that were mentioned in name were Urbana Adult Education Center, or the Philo Business District, or Southeast Urbana. Engaging new artists in street fairs, so ensuring that we're always having new and emerging artists and not necessarily the same folks each time. Ensuring dynamic and growing representation, and then again, like creating more public input on larger projects. And then, yeah, this is an accidental copy of a slide, excuse me. I didn't think you guys had a lot necessarily threat, other than you had talked about the threat of sometimes feeling like, well, what if we do hit a funding impasse or something, you know, that direction, what can we do? Okay, so other things that just came up last year was really growing our knowledge and competence as a staff, but also as a commission. So some of the things we collectively, myself included, identified really wanting to get more familiar with was I think fresh on the mind then was a conversation I had where folks were concerned about vandalism and graffiti or vandalism of public art, and I had cited some research about public art actually helping to deter like tagging and things like that. And so being able to like really know research that's going to support public art in those instances where people might be apprehensive because they don't know what the research has shown. Awareness of issues facing international families or international arts, sort of right to work issues, things that come up when folks who are here on visas or things like that may want to engage our programs. Awareness of relevant city ordinances or laws that might apply to us when we're developing a new program, and how we can also mitigate barriers to engagement. So as I said before, things like multilingual or disability aware programs, reaching out in deliberate ways to incarcerated groups or housing or food scarce populations. So those have been things that came up last year. And then we talked about some potential programs to explore at the time. And so those were things like Youth Poet Laureate Program, Urbana Fringe Festival, Arts Connect, which was a hopeful networking program that would have been in-person gatherings for artists, and a mural program, specifically having in mind that space above the parking garage, which is 115 Main Street. And that is kind of what we talked about last year. So before I go forward, I'd love to take any of your questions or comments of anything that wasn't captured here that you want to reflect upon from last year. Anything you'd like to add to that visioning process? No worries.
I'm ready for 2021's conversation personally.
Yep.
Like leave that year in the dust.
I know, it's real. Well, okay, so 2020 strategic visioning, this is sort of evaluating it a year later. So let me just ground us first by saying COVID-19 obviously had a very big impact on our program. I can't go into all of the details of how it's impacted our program, but I wrote down some key things. First, all of our staff have been working remotely. All of us, being me and Heather Ann, have been working remotely, and our interns as well. We've had at this citywide special event permitting suspension. So that means we haven't been giving out any special event permits for any large scale gatherings of any kind or any gatherings that would require a permit on city property. Programs therefore have been adapted or hybrid. As you know, Young Artist Studio has been virtual, for instance. Artists of the Corridor has had digital exhibits. Art at the Market has not happened, and Downtown Get Down did not happen this past summer. Those were two that were very impacted. Urbana Arts Grant support has been really important during this time because a lot of people got funded for projects right in March or February that then come April, they were unable to even conceive of with us being in lockdown. So I think one of the key things that we've had to shift our attention to is working with like our arts grant recipients on how to adapt or think differently about the programs that they propose so that they can move forward. And that's taken up a substantial amount of staff time as well. Same with Artist Relief. So really researching, we did that whole cold calling effort to artists over the summer where we called every artist and arts organization that had worked with our program in the past or local business, arts business, to make sure they knew about artist relief programs and walked them through some of the different upcoming deadlines. That was a big effort, and that took staff support and intern support. We also shifted our focus towards new collaborations, and one beautiful thing that's grown out of this time has been collaborations with organizations that we don't always get to collaborate with on the regular. So one is, the Great Art Doors, obviously, and then things like Art in a Time of Quarantine, Haiku from Home, Pandemics as a Portal. These are collaborations with Krannert Art Museum, with the Museum of the Grand Prairie, with Chambana Moms. These represent, all of these that are mentioned here are collaborations that bring together entities from the university, from both cities, and even from our county. And I think that's what's really nice about these is they really represent really wide collaborations between partners that don't always get to interact. And then I want to just mention some initial achievements that we had, even in this time of, you know, a lot of constraint. So we had, as I said, increased collaborations between campus, the city, the county, parks. Adapted events have meant new audiences have been possible. And so I mentioned a few of those there in the ways that we creatively adapted a lot of our programs. So many things were able to go forward. And we've had, you know, a few small scale in-person things like ribbon cuttings for the new murals and things like that. Of course, I'm most proud about the Youth Poet Laureate program as a collaboration with Urban Word. After so many people were delighted to have seen Amanda Gorman's poem at the inauguration, I've had nothing but, you know, urge to tell everyone, and the organization that does the National Youth Poet Laureate is Urban Word NYC, and we're connected with them now. We have a connection right direct with them. The student that assumes our position of Youth Poet Laureate will be absolutely eligible to be in Amanda's role next year. So that's what's really exciting, is there is a pathway for Urbana to also pipeline people towards a National Youth Poet Laureate position. That's very exciting. And then one of the things that we did allow last year was murals into our grant program for the first time, and I've continued that this time. We had a lot of mural applications, folks. You'll be hearing the full list of awarded grantees next meeting. But that is something really exciting, I think, for us, because if all of these, or even a good handful of them, get funded, there'll be quite a sudden drop of murals all over Urbana, and I think it'll be really exciting over the next few months. So these are some things that have also meant that I have gotten in touch with a broader network for the arts program. So now I'm on a network of people that are all having Youth Poet Laureate programs across the United States. We meet regularly. There's a network of municipal arts coordinators that I'm slowly kind of having more regular communication with, who have also given me pointers for our contracts and our mural programs and ordinances or other things that I might consider. So all of those things I think are great moves forward. And like I said, we had these kind of questions to ground us, and I really do want to hear your insights and not talk any longer, but I wanted to give you kind of a sense of, you know, a shorthand of how the year has looked for us. And what I hope to give you at next month's meeting is more of a smaller sort of annual report that'll give you kind of everything that we were able to do, just a recap of some of the things you've heard about over the past few months in my staff report that really represent things that we've continued or built new in this time of COVID-19, when we've really had to adapt our thinking. And I can tell you just personally, where my heart is at is our program needs to be less concerned with events and gatherings, and really more concerned with art that public art that people can experience when they're walking on the street. Things like supporting the grantees with our programs, and then artist relief, just in this time of COVID. That's really where my heart's been. So I'm happy to keep sharing so you can see these questions up here. But I really want to turn it over to all of you to first take any questions about the things you just saw, and then we'll go to these questions. So any questions first for anything in this presentation? Oh, you're muted, Frank.
No questions.
No questions. All right. Oh, go ahead, Barbara.
How do you actually track the populations and areas that we reach and don't reach, so we can make informed decisions? If we want to expand and make sure we're not overlooking anyone, how do you track all that?
Well, I'll tell you, we don't track it very well. I mean, it's hard to track it at this moment because we don't have a standard of practice around evaluation. So one thing that I wanted to say about evaluation is that we talked last year about wanting to maybe ask for different kinds of evaluation during our final reports for our grantees. And that's certainly something that we continue to look at. We got this new software we're getting rolling out this year, and that it'll include a revised version of our final report where we will be able to ask more demographic information and specific sort of head count questions, which we don't really ask. We ask them when they come present to us typically. But as far as our own programs, you know, I came from my role at the university where my standard of practice was I distributed actually ad nauseum to everyone a little like evaluation form at the end of every event that they had to fill out and tell me, you know, what's their race, gender, like sexuality, like, and actually it drove people nuts, you know, like it was, I think, exhausting in a whole other way. So I'd really like to think about what that ought to be, because I'm not sure it should be that, but what that ought to be for our program. And one effort that I think is really going to assist us is that the School of Art and Design, under the leadership of Kevin Hamilton, has reached out. I mentioned this at a past meeting, to talk about offering arts assessment to both 40 North and the Urbana Arts and Culture program. So I just met last week again with them. They picked back up with meetings since the holidays, and they will be, so I shared with them all of the things that we've talked about, you know, what we want to know, who we really want to know, who we're serving, who we're not serving. We really want a robust evaluation of how much our programs are mitigating barriers and what we can do better. But also just generally, you know, really an assessment of like, what are we featuring? Are we featuring every arts community? Are we featuring lots of different kinds of arts? So that was a huge point of conversation with the assessment person. And she's really excited to actually pull together like some sort of proposal, I think, of like, this is how we could support you. And one exciting thing she mentioned at this past meeting, and I'm sorry for not including this in my staff report, it kind of just occurring to me now, but she did mention that there may be possibility for them to, they do have some funding. And so there might also be a possibility for them to fund somebody who would actually come and support in person, like potentially work with our program to do assessment. And I'm like, that would be fabulous. So we might have some really great help coming up with doing more dynamic assessment of our programs.
Right. Well, and Kevin's a former member of this commission also.
I know.
Yeah.
And I mean, the one thing I can say is like, you know, having worked very specifically in diversity inclusion, it's really on my mind. And it's something that I can't necessarily say we've done a good evaluation process every event that we do, assessing who's there, what communities might they represent. We have not been doing that. But one thing that I do is when I look at all of our programs in a lineup, I want to see diversity in terms of what we're offering. Sure. You know, and so I really try to think through that when I think about a full year's worth of events and programs and initiatives, like who are we meeting and how does what we're offering invite like different participation. So that's more kind of like where I land with things. And of course, with the grant program, I also ground our juries in that goal and that mission so that they know, hey, when we put all these together on a lineup, I want to see really strong diversity. I don't want to see just musical acts being funded. You know, I don't want to see just dance. I want to see a good mix, and I want a good mix of cultural representation of like what kinds of traditions they're coming from. Mm-hmm. So that's the only way I could answer that question right now.
Well, I know that data management is hard. I do it with the programs that I do and on a much smaller scale, but I know it's hard to get people to answer, even if it's only a few questions. They're so busy, they forget, and then you have to remind them, and it's necessary for grants and things, but sometimes it's a lot of work. I appreciate what you have to do.
And I think we just really want it to be meaningful. You know, a lot of times I think about who we're showcasing. So it's like who we're hiring, who we're contracting to do work. Like I really err on the side of really working to keep that very diverse and a really diverse group. And so I think it comes in who we hire. It's also in like what we're producing in terms of content, you know. So like when I think about cultural celebrations, I'm, you know, really excited that this past December, we co-sponsored the Kwanzaa events that were going on. I'm excited about Natalie, who's on this call, her upcoming like Lunar New Year cultural, you know, workshop for Young Artist Studio. I'm excited about the things that we did for sensory sensitivity for folks who have disabilities recently. So just like different things that we are trying to offer to meet groups that may not have been met. Our Congolese like dance workshop. So just different things that we've done that direction are part of what I get excited about, but I want to obviously see that grow. And as far as assessment is concerned, I'm looking forward to how School of Art and Design will be able to possibly assist us there with being really meaningful, not just doing it to do it, but really making sure it has impact. Other questions? Okay, before we like all run out of steam, let's talk about some of our initial thoughts around these questions, and then we'll end for today and we'll pick back up after we have, I think I'll have probably about 1 or 2 grant presentations next month, a brief staff report, and then we'll pick back up with this. So what do you see as the strongest support our program offers towards advancing arts and culture? If you thought about this, what did you write down?
Grants program.
Grants program.
Putting money in the hands of artists who would otherwise not be able to afford a platform to put their stuff out there is a highly advantageous thing. I mean, it's, you know, just it's impossible almost to imagine doing some of the things that would happen for those folks who received the grants without them.
Yeah, definitely.
The common thread we hear with almost everyone who makes a presentation.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Definitely. Frank.
Kind of following up on what Jared said about the grants program, I felt that created a lot of opportunities for mentoring for artists and also for networking. So I think those really meshed together quite a bit. And I think also through that mentoring and networking, that created opportunities for more exposure and cheerleading for artists, even for people who didn't necessarily get anything, or maybe were perhaps dubious about doing something short term, but at least kind of planted a seed.
Right. Yeah. Other thoughts? Were you all thinking grant program, or were you thinking of other things?
The only other thing I thought of was the festivals that we have, especially when they are supporting a particular culture. You know, we have had in the past supported, you know, like the Japanese festival that they have in the September, right? And some of those others, the Asian one that's in
Asia Fest,
at the end of
in April.
Right. Yeah. So I think those also helped, particularly perhaps culturally.
Yeah.
I think the publicity that you are and showcasing that we've offered artists too has greatly enhanced their work and their opportunities.
Okay, well, let's go to the next question, unless folks want to add to that one. Feel free to chime in at any time. Given our circumstances of COVID-19 and restrictions on our programs, how do you want us to refocus in advancing public art in Urbana? So I shared with you a little bit about how, like, where my heart is and how I'm focusing. I'd love to hear your feedback on that. Would you like to see something different? Or are you feeling similarly? Go ahead, Stacy.
I wasn't sure if we were going in a particular order or not. So.
Oh, it's okay.
Okay, so I have some thoughts on this. I was thinking about virtual studio visits with artists of different types. Right.
So, I love that.
Bringing the media to the artist spaces, like I would love to have do a studio visit. I would totally do that. Things to consider: how have studio spaces and practices changed in the pandemic? So I'm on a lot of I'm jurying a lot of art exhibitions, and they're virtual, and people don't have studio space. So a lot of practices have changed, right? Especially as funding and opportunities have been, and jobs have been scarce, right? Maybe even thinking about or expanding on who is considered an artist. And I'm gonna put Jared, shout him out really quickly. He has a DDJ in the background. If I'm not mistaken, I remember he has the DDJ SC2, same one I have right in his background, right? So if the way that we might want to think about who is an artist, or how they practice, might be a way of really kind of expanding that as well. And then I think you're kind of addressing this with Kevin already. So I was thinking maybe interview campus professors in FAA, Fine and Applied Arts. And I second what Barbara said. I think it was Barbara who said it earlier about spaces for animation. I don't know who said that.
Pat.
Pat said that. Okay.
She's the animation lady.
Right. All right, Pat, let me not take your props. Absolutely. I second, third, and fourth that. Interviews with artists can also be projected in these spaces. So the same ones you might do in the studio, project those in the outside spaces and bring that inside to the outside.
it's that thing where I'm like, I cannot wait until we can gather. Because I think the challenge for us is that is anything that's too attractive will attract a crowd. And so I was thinking about one of my favorite times was I was in New Orleans and I was walking around. And one of the things I encountered was a documentary film being screened on the side of a building, just while people were walking around. And we all just sort of sat down here and there, you know, fetching, but also watching it. And I was like, this is a kind of like, yes, I'd love to have things just projected more often for us to sort of encounter while we're out. And of course, the crowd came and sat and watched it. So I think it's a challenge of like, I cannot wait to do a few more things that really, you know, how like our outdoor movie screenings, those were so fun in Boneyard Creek. I'd love to like do that, but also project on sides of buildings or do, you know, just do more. You know, we funded Urbana Love, that movie screen that Matt Show put on the side of Analog, and there's so much more that we can do, and I can't wait for those things. The closest I've gotten for FAA has been doing my regular grant workshop over there, and of course this year I didn't because I did it as a video, but I would really like to do more with fine and applied arts. And one of the conversations I had with professors all in a room at one point was discussing the possibility of doing a 4-credit class where students would come work with the arts and culture program. So that's something that I did that with the Women's Center with Gender and Women's Studies back when I was there, and it was very easy to do, and I loved doing it. So it's something that I would love to continue to pursue with FAA.
Let's talk about that, because that's something
maybe you can help me in an ambassador for that.
Yeah.
Frank, what were you going to say?
Can we expand our vision, kind of following up on a lot of what Stacey was saying? Our vision of traditional art and traditional artists, in terms of non-traditional art and non-traditional artists, and also non-traditional networks. And I think you've talked about the different networks that we looked at, but are there other informal groupings and networks, arts and crafts circles that are going on that maybe we can find a way of tapping into those?
Yes, absolutely.
Could even be the automobile enthusiasts, you know, the antique car collectors. They were always popular at the corn festival,
Sweet Corn Festival. Well, and we've talked about culinary arts and like other ways to really think about how people are creative. You know, we had our wood carver who was funded a couple years, and then we've had other folks who've come in and done maybe arts that we see just less often, but I would like to see more. I'm really excited about some of the grant applications we got this year, and I think they're going to speak to a lot of these things that everybody's brought up tonight. So after our next jury meeting, I'll be able to make official announcements about who gets funded, but oh goodness, it's going to break my heart no matter who is unable to be funded, because there's so many good applications this year. Let's go to our next question. Given our commitment to culture, how would you like us to amplify cultural work?
I had a couple for that last one, Rachel.
Oh, okay, go ahead.
You know, and one thing that came to mind when we're thinking about refocusing, and one thing that I thought, you know, you could task an intern with, because an intern would love to do this, is see what cool things people are doing to engage culture in the digital era now, through whatever kind of streaming it is. You know, is it, you know, a computer program that people all participate in to help create a piece of artwork? I did a little bit of digging around, and people are doing some really interesting stuff out there that has to do with interaction and stuff that's made possible by the internet. That might be a cool thing for an intern to look into, because we could maybe translate some of those things into a program or something like that. So that was one thing. Another, the other side of the digital world of thinking about art in the time of, as you like to say, in the time of
quarantine.
In the time of COVID and quarantine, is access to art. And, you know, again, not sure if there's another program that would be something we could model off of, or the feasibility of it. But, you know, my wife and I hang art in our house. but it's, the same art most of the time. We don't switch it out very often. We have commitments to certain folks. We love certain pieces and we keep them up. But maybe, just like we do Artists in the Corridor, people could sign up to host a piece of art in their house. And, because people are still gathering in very small groups. My wife and I have our 4 friends that we see, and that's it. We've all made an agreement with each other to not see anyone else outside of our group. And if anybody's going to, they have to tell the group that they're going to see other people. And that's how we're trying to keep our social circle really small. But it'd be really cool, I think, to be like, hey, I can have 3 of these pieces in my house for, these 2 weeks. And when our friends come over, I can be like, hey, check these out and check this artist out who's here in exposure. I don't know. I'm just trying to think of innovative ideas. Plus, if you bring the art to the people, that's the idea. If you bring art to the people, then they don't have to come to the art. You eliminate some of those problems with people, who might otherwise have a really hard time getting to an art show, getting to a gallery, finding the time to do that.
Yeah.
Totally off the wall idea, but just one thing
Not that off the wall.
Yeah. I do it with music all the time in the schools and community centers and hospitals. Well, why not?
So anyway, that was something I thought of when how we should rethink how people get access to art too.
I think that question of accessibility has been really interesting during this time, because we've had both situations where people have come to online things and said, I would have never been able to come to this because I never have a sitter, or I don't, ever get able to leave, or I can't have this open in one window and doing my other thing I got to do with somewhere else. It's been possible for people to experience things. So it's created certain access. And then of course, there's the things that create such barriers about technology. So there's shifts in how we think about access. And I think one of the things that I've valued on the arts grant side of things is a lot of the grantees and I have been talking together about, even after this time is shifted again, and we're maybe no longer under these restrictions and we can gather again, I imagine that we will still be doing some version of hybrid virtual streaming of many of our things as another mitigation around accessibility, because we have familiarity in the tools now. So I'm really fascinated by that, and I'm excited to see how that grows. And then one thing I wanted to mention that your comments made me think of, Jared, is that we have, I did meet with a municipal arts coordinator recently who told me about a software she uses, super, super simple, but where artists can upload some information about a mural they'd want to do or something that they'd like to do, and it will help categorize, and then venues can upload, here's our seating capacity. I mean, this is a lot after we can gather again stuff, but here's what we can offer. Or during this time of COVID, here's a wall I have exterior that I would love to support a mural on. And it will actually help me, because what I do now is I match people myself, but it would actually create an opportunity for artists and venues to find each other, and more of kind of a social media way. So I'm really excited to explore that and possibly use that here in Urbana.
Cool.
So it is, let's just do a time check real quick, 6:07. We can continue forward with the last 2 questions, or we can pick back up with this next month after I go a little bit more over our past year. What are your thoughts?
I'm finishing up.
You're supportive of finishing up? Okay, great. All right, so the next question was kind of more about culture. So we talked a lot about that this time last year. I shared a little bit. What's on your mind as far as how you'd like to see our program amplify cultural work in the community?
So
and cultural programming.
I had one thought on this, one direct way, but also the abstract and at large way. So I'll start with the abstract and then work that into the direct. So when I read this, and this has been a big thing for me personally in 2020, is thinking about, being purposeful in my actions as a city council person, and I think that translates into this question as, are we being, and not that art has to be this way, but, when we're thinking about the cultural and the artistic, how they're coming together, are we being purposeful in the cultural influence of the art that we're supporting.
Mm-hmm.
You know, are we, you know, like you were kind of, you've alluded to this, Rachel, and I know you and I've kind of talked about this before, you know, are we driving culture with art, or are we reacting to culture with art? You know, there's a big difference between the two of those. And yeah, you know, you've got some play with between both and how we do that. But, you know, like, are we engaging in using our resources to help make cultural change? You know, is art influencing, you know, how people are dealing with cultural issues like the movement for Black Lives, climate change, sex work, you know, thinking about how we're doing that. So one of the things that I thought, to tie that abstract of, like, you know, pushing culture with art into a direct action, is what if we created an arts grant category that was specifically related to a project that was supposed to create cultural influence, right? If somebody brings a project forward that is purposeful in trying to create cultural change, whether that's, you know, a designated protest, whether that's, you know, that involves the arts, or, you know, it's an action that shows, you know, climate change, whatever it may be, if they bring a project to that, we could help focus and purposefully push that by making it, you know, known in a grant program, for example. So that was one thing I had thought of in, like, the abstract, and then in a direct way to actually turn that into a real thing.
And I think the easiest, like, immediate way that could be done is that, you know, as we've developed the 3 tiers within our program, and I think it's really fair at this point to call it the Urbana Arts and Culture Grant Program, because we fund plenty of things that probably would identify themselves as cultural work. And one of the things, though, that we could do, very similar to Arts in the Schools, is now have a eligibility checkbox where you can say, I want to be considered as having this sort of spotlight award or something, or even a variety of them or something, however much money you'd want to delineate, that specifically highlights, you know, work that really aims to make a cultural or social impact or something like that. That could be an award kind of eligibility or designation within any of the categories. That's what we do for Arts in the Schools. For anything that's really going to make serious change around arts education, is folks can just check that box that says, I meet this eligibility, and then they're considered within it. So I think there's a lot of opportunity to create particular calls for art that might speak to contemporary issues, or that really, you know, might forward or create culture in the community, that could fit into something like that, should you want to pursue something that direction. Other thoughts on this question? How would you like to see culture amplified?
Could be, I was just going to comment that it could be also a historic celebration of something that was past that has impacted our lives. And
yeah, and that's something that also is kind of written into our program goals. So when I give out the arts grant workshop, I emphasize, like, one of our program's goals, I have them all memorized now, is celebrating Urbana's artistic and cultural diversity, but, like, commemorating local and multicultural traditions and histories. Like, that's one. It's specifically. And so those kinds of things, I'll ask people why Urbana and who in Urbana and what in Urbana is really part of this project. Other thoughts on this question?
I was definitely thinking about funding arts and political activism. So just kind of seconding what Jared had already said. I'm thinking about activism of various sorts.
Absolutely. Frank?
Just an amplification of what I had said in the previous question, who and what are cultural workers? I just continuing to work on expanding that definition.
Yeah, and maybe deciding, you know, for ourselves, like, maybe marinating on that between now and next month. What is cultural work? What are cultural workers? What do we mean?
Thank you. That I actually had that question highlighted. What is cultural work and cultural workers? So,
to us, yeah, that's really important. I'll send that question out so we can all marinate on that too. Let's move on to this other question, because I think they're all connected. Evaluating our commitment to diversity and inclusion, what populations do you see us as serving, and what do you feel like we maybe have not yet met with our arts and culture programming? And how do you want to see us grow in our commitment? Now you guys identify, I'll just say a few words on this since I'm probably closest to knowing all the different things we've done over the past year. So, and I actually may have do I have another slide after this? No, I do not. Okay. So for example, there are a few things that I know you guys identified last year, and that was something I said earlier. So we talked about like people impacted by incarceration. We talked about seniors and elders. We talked about people with disabilities. We talked about communities of color, various communities of color. We've also talked about people who are multilingual or trilingual or need things in a different language. So largely where those things have happened is within theming our programs, like and then on occasion, listening sessions. So I did a listening session this past year with folks who wanted to talk about disability in the arts, and we did one specifically for youth and teens. And then we have, I hired somebody over the summer who assisted us with a lot of language translation work, specifically on Spanish to work with me. And then we had support for French Mandarin and like discussion between Mandarin or Chinese at the time. But yes, we had a lot going on in terms of translation. So a lot of our things have been translated now, including website information or other things. And we also assisted the city community development office with some translation of other forms and documents. But that's something that we've worked to do. Now that's different than having people who can speak multiple languages. I can speak Spanish, so I can do that at programs, but I don't speak other languages. So for that would require like hiring people or hiring interpreters, for instance, for anyone who's deaf and attending a program and would have that need. So there's like a lot of things I think we could think about, but capacity is often an issue that I encounter when I'm like, I want to do all these things and I'm not sure how to move forward budgetarily or with what we have. But let me ask you, who do you think we're serving and who not? Go ahead, Frank.
People that I've been wondering about if we've been serving are people who are really on the margins of society, people who are homeless, people who are unemployed or marginally employed, people who are food insecure, housing insecure, people living in very marginal housing, people in trailer parks. And a related question, because I don't know how far Urbana's reach, does it include unincorporated areas that are adjacent to Urbana? Are we talking strictly Urbana, municipal?
We're funded to serve Urbana primarily, those who are within, like for instance, our arts grants can't fund projects that take place in unincorporated parts of Urbana and county land. But that said, we certainly can do programs that help serve those populations directly and maybe even do so nearer to where they're located. Ideally, if we're having an event, it still needs to be kind of within city limits in answer to your question. Mm-hmm.
That's where we've grown.
With Weaver Park,
mm-hmm.
Now is that county? Is that in Urbana, right there on Main Street?
Now, my planner friends would know this exactly, but I believe that actually that is Urbana,
mm-hmm.
and that whole park's owned by the Park District. That's Urbana. There is a part like right across the street that is unincorporated. But that I believe is Urbana. Now there's things like other neighborhoods that may be neighborhoods you're also thinking of that may not be necessarily within Urbana, but that doesn't mean we can't do work with them, support like the community as much as possible. So I think when I'm thinking about this issue, the things that are closest to doing that work that need amplification would be, like our experiences working with Township, I think has been wonderful, and I really want to grow those collaborations. Our experience, this new upcoming work with the Bucket Brigade and Tiger Market and Silver Hearts, which is, really meeting a lot of families who are food scarce and some that are facing homelessness. I think that topics, that avenue is another partnership that could really help enhance those collaborations. But I do want to see much more this direction.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm. Go ahead, Barbara.
just sort of in retrospect, that's one of the ways we've changed too, because the original idea was that we were creating events in Urbana, in downtown Urbana, and we had, in the early days, we didn't think that far out. That's one of the ways we've changed and expanded.
Well, and in some ways, we are funded to do that because we are funded partially through tax incremental financing funding. So there is a large portion of our work that does need to focus on and around downtown. But that doesn't mean that we can't include other things and shouldn't, because I think it's actually, that was one of the first questions I had when I came into this job, is I was like, so is it mostly downtown? Because I'm thinking all Urbana, like I'm ready, you know, let's talk about everything. But I think some of those things like our collaboration, the Great Outdoors, my urge on that committee was like, let's look at underserved areas of Urbana and making sure we're actually picking parks adjacent to neighborhoods that maybe are underserved by the arts. You know, let's make sure that we include the community garden. That's such a huge place, doing great work in that neighborhood. Let's make sure that that place is given art, you know, to have on display. And so that is another collaboration I've really been happy about, and ways that I really hope to continue is like working with Lehrman Neighborhood Action Committee, working with the township, working with like Courage Connection, and a lot of this does too happen through the Arts Grant Program, because some of these organizations apply for arts grants and then we can work very directly if they're funded.
Sure. Definitely.
So I had when I read that question, what that made me think of more so than specific populations was the same. I know I've brought this up before, but the diversity and inclusion of the variety of arts that there are, and we've kind of touched on this. But you know, if you look at our list of programs, you know, while they do involve bits and pieces, they're very largely visual arts based. You know,
is that how you see it? I actually see it quite differently, but
it's interesting because, you know, and you just know the context of them so much more. But if I was a chef, for example, and I looked at that list of programs, I would question where I fit in.
I hear you. Yeah,
you know,
I do.
I wouldn't look at that list of programs and be like, they're not really reaching, you know, out to me in my creative outlet, you know.
Well, and we've talked about aesthetics too, and I think that's huge.
So anyway, that I just wanted to say that again, and then because that's what I thought of when I thought of that, because I know from our past discussions we are making conscious efforts, and I've seen the fruits of those efforts in trying to reach cultural groups that haven't been reached before, as far as, you know, demographics are concerned. But I don't feel like I've seen as much growth in diversity of arts being supported, even though I know we are. And, you know, we can't do everything all at once, but I just wanted to bring that refocus back there because, you know, like theater, I don't see too many of those things. We have gotten to do some more dance stuff than we did in the past, but food's a big one. And food's a great cultural break too, because we're able to incorporate food, you know, people, I don't know, it's the great equalizer in my opinion, because food from everywhere is delicious. And I love to eat food from anywhere and everywhere, and it brings me out. Like, you know, I show up for good food. I love to show up for good food. So, you know, that's one area.
Yeah.
Also people who are, you know, not necessarily in a, you know, religious sense, but people who are doing spiritual things that we don't, you know, I think there's a lot of spirituality in art that gets ignored a lot, whether it's religious or not, that people are focusing on, which would be cool. And then, you know, another one when we talk about not focusing on family-friendly stuff, but people who are doing the titillating arts, if you will, you know, people who are, you know, pushing the bounds of how we think about sexuality and what's appropriate in the public realm and for consumption, and, you know, to try and, you know, break down these social norms that we have about those things. I think there are people who are doing those things here, and I feel like they would also be hesitant to reach out to a program like ours because it doesn't seem approachable for that kind of, you know, for that kind of outlet. So, you know, when I read that, those were the things that I thought of when I thought about diversity and inclusion.
I appreciate that, and I really like the language too of like approachability. Like, how do you make the program like just appetizing and approachable and like a potential partner to so many different kinds of things. Mm-hmm. Yeah, and oh my gosh, Jared, I wasn't trying to disagree with you, by the way, either. I'm just like, that's interesting. I didn't see it the same way, but I also really value hearing, no matter how you all see our work, like how you see it, because you have, you have a different vantage point than I'm in. And when I think about like, oh, well, we do like all these different things, I am thinking about like, I mean, the grant program, I'm actually trying not to focus on, because the grant program is already like, it's its own thing and it's based on what people apply for. So I don't think we take credit for what comes forward through the grant program. I'm thinking more like when we have Young Artist Studio, when I have Art Now, when we do Open Scene, I've really tried to make sure that each one kind of features a different form of art and a different kind of artist and a different cultural practice. But it's also always insufficient. And I was going to say like theater, for instance, or like I've had really great conversations with Matt Harsh about like, let's talk about like street art and like where are things located in this program, like just aesthetically. I think that's really big and important. And I think there's a lot of gaps to fill. I've been really happy during this time of COVID that, I was able to facilitate, for instance, that town hall for the theater community. And I facilitated an event with Seitu Jones around food and justice in the arts. And like these kinds of things were just beautiful, but it's like they came about because other partners came forward. And I'd love to see us do more work like that too.
And in Rachel, it could just be even something as simple as thinking about, the word art and people's visceral reaction to seeing something with the word art in it. What do you think? You think of a painting, you think of, a sculpture, you think of what you traditionally think of as a visual art of some kind or another. And we're Urbana Arts Grants, Art Now, Artist at the Corridor, Art at the Market, Young Artist Studio, the Art Expo. So many of those things just use that word. And I think they might be, like the big one that stands out to me in our program is Culture Fest. When I see that, I think differently about what I might experience when I go there, what I'm going to see when I go there, because culture is more boundless. It doesn't give me that visceral reaction of like, hey, this is a visual arts thing, just from a gut reaction. So
well, Culture Fest has been sort of tabled because of COVID-19. It was my first event I had to cancel. But it's also one where I'm like, it really could have been, it could still be reconceived in this time of needing to do something virtual or hybrid and offer something else that still speaks to its spirit, Sure.
I would offer the word maybe creative.
Creators, create now.
That's so funny you said that, because I was in a meeting yesterday where we changed artists to creators on everything. So you will see in our newest call for art, it says creators instead of artists because of this conversation, very similar. Exactly. But that's interesting. It hadn't occurred to me to do that more generally with our program in certain instances. I think that could make a lot of sense.
Well, I think even with music, for me, I came on, my background is classical music and theater and ballet and opera. It's all, those genres, and we don't really support a lot of that. It's right. A different kind of music that's usually supported.
And that's where I was raised. I was a ballerina for many, many years. So like I thought about that too. Like we don't have really strong connections with theater or dance right now, inherent in our programming. And certainly with classical music, I think we could do a lot more.
You won't get any argument from me.
I'm going to have to take off now, but it's been very helpful, very interesting conversation.
For sure.
I'm really grateful to all of you for your insights. I'm prepared if you're feeling ready to say we'll continue this conversation next month, and I'll send you maybe some other questions that you can ponder in the meantime. I heard a couple tonight, and I'll write them down and send them to you. And my hope is to come with a little bit more of a reflection on just the past year, what we were able to do, maybe kind of drawing from this conversation and where I see there to be gaps and opportunities too.
Rachel, I had a couple of just off not any of our particular questions that we might want to consider. But I had thought about our mission statement, our mission vision statement, and not necessarily changing it per se, but if we could, I think it would be interesting to each year dedicate time to like making one for that year. You know what I mean? For that season, to focus on something to try and drive our purpose forward and make it seem I don't know. I thought that might be cool to do a small something like that. I don't know if a mission vision is the right way to do that or not, but it just seems like things have changed since the last time that it was written. And when I was rereading it on the front page, it wasn't, it was kind of, it's the typical thing, but it wasn't focused. It wasn't like, hey, we're gonna, really trying to accomplish this thing. So I thought that might be something for us to entertain. Another thing that I always push, another thing I think it would be good for us to consider as a body is the frequency of how often we meet. Once a month is it's difficult to get a lot done in 12 meetings in a year. And, I know everybody has time constraints on this, and that obviously have to be, a longer conversation, but even without trying to push to something as crazy as, every other week, or anything like that, maybe going from 12 to 15 or going to 12 to 18 and doing them every 3 weeks or something like that. Just because this is, I think that consistency and engagement can actually lead to greater productivity over long term for these things, because that 3 week gap, 4 week gap, if you consider the rest of the week after this week is over, between now and the next meeting, so much happens in my life that I almost have to come back and be like, okay, well, I don't even remember what we talked about a month ago. What were we focusing on? So something to consider. And then the last thing was, I don't know if we want to have a discussion about fundraising and trying to utilize fundraising in some greater aspect into funding programs, because we have some great local groups who do a lot of stuff that's helpful. Urbana Rotary, for example, funds stuff for the library all the time and works very closely with the library. And I think it might be interesting to see if they would be interested in supporting arts more, culture more. I don't know. Those are my last untangential thoughts to what we were talking about today. I just wanted to put them in your brain for next time.
Yeah. Can I share my final thoughts really quickly?
Please, I'm ready. I'm going to open a document and write them all down.
And I'm going to send you these too. So I was also thinking about so many of things have already been addressed, and I'm going to second that growing a working relationship with Cunningham Township. I was also thinking maybe I'm thinking a purpose collaboration with, for example, FAA and their DEI initiatives, and I'll say our initiatives, because they're from administration down to unit level. There are a lot of local organizations looking for DEI collaboration, and I think we need to ride that wave with a very clear vision of creating creating annual DEI sustainable programming. And collaborations with the cultural houses on campus. So Chancellor Jones has really charged us to be more outward facing, right? And more inclusive of the local community. I think we need to ride that while the leadership is calling for that.
Truly.
And let me see, ask the community to provide feedback for suggestions for programming. That was already said in the 2020 brainstorm, and developing a qualitative and quantitative something data analysis of something, and you already mentioned that as well. I have no idea what Qualtrics is, the platform, but somebody told me about
survey
that
platform.
Right, and I was like, wait, I need that as a visual artist, right? Thinking about programming. So that's what I wanted to share really quickly. I will share these things. Thank you. It is great to be here. It is great to be back.
Yay, I'm so glad you're back too.
Yeah, I will. Thank you for everything, and thank you for that history, because I really see how the committee has grown and the efforts of you know, this program and everything. So thank you very much.
Well, I always have to smirk when people bring up the cultural centers because, as you know, I lived and breathed it for 8 years before I came into this job. It was the place I was. So like, I think that when I first came into this role, I was like, all right, I'm not going to like drag my other job into this in some way right away. I want to like situate myself into like what the arts program has known. But I'm thrilled, you know, about the possibility of working more intentionally with the cultural centers, as they are also being charged, I think, with doing a little bit more work in the community.
Well, I think we all are. And I think it helps me do my work, right?
Exactly,
So,
yeah.
And we're open to those new possibilities. Otherwise, we don't grow.
Mhm.
Right.
Yeah, thank you, both of you, if you're willing to send, I mean, Jared and Stacy, and of course, Pat and Barbara, and you know, anyone who made comments tonight and wrote them down anywhere, if you'd like to send them to me, I've kind of already started formulating them in my mind into some questions that kind of theme them together. But I'd love to take a look at how you wrote them up and try to synthesize them into some questions that we can orbit around next month too.
Got you.
Thank you for your time. Thank you for all the volunteering you all have been doing and being involved in other events. Please mark March 5th down in your calendars because I would love to see you at the sneak peek. And one of the things I have usually had arts and culture coordinators do, or excuse me, commissioners do, is help me introduce the grantees, which will be a little weird on Zoom, but I'd still love to maybe invite you to help me host in some way and help me honor these people so they're not just listening to my voice like for a very long time.
Yeah.
Okay. Thank you so much.
Thank
Okay,
you.
well, let me go ahead then, and you want to close the meeting?
Can
Can I just make one announcement before we do?
Yeah, go ahead.
The Read Across America is having a mini festival this year, part day, March 6th and 7th. And then they'll have a virtual festival also as part of their annual celebration.
And we funded it again. So we are co-sponsoring it.
Great.
Yeah. So one thing I want to mention, which actually I forgot, it is our last announcement, and I'm going to have to send it out to the people who had to dodge out early. We are going to need to have a special meeting. I'm so sorry. But you did just say you want more meetings possibly, Jared. So maybe this is like karma for saying
You said that.
So we're going to need to add a meeting for next week, maybe. I don't know if it's going to be possible. I'm going to be emailing you all about it because the way the jury's lined up this year is I would have to wait to present that listing of awardees till next month. And then all these people would be waiting and really wondering if they got an arts grant. And they want to know, and I want to tell you. So all it would be is a very simple meeting where I'd be presenting those, the jury selections, and you would be giving kind of a nod.
Right.
Mm-hmm. You guys don't even vote on them, but you do kind of like do one of these. And you can let me know, of course, if you have any concerns about anybody being funded or something like that.
Okay.
And of course, you've had representation on the juries, so some of you will already be in the know, but you know, for the rest, that's how it will be. So I will send an email out about that tonight or tomorrow morning at the latest, and then we'll see if we can get that scheduled and noticed, because we would need to get it noticed by the end of the week if we're meeting next week.
Okay.
All right, thanks so much.
Okay.
Right, thank you.
Stay
Okay, well, let me just go ahead and adjourn the meeting. Okay, we finished all the business on the agenda, and we now adjourn.